Hi, and welcome back to another episode. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Jake Fisher.
And I'm Alex Nizick.
So the car that we're going to highlight today is one that I think all three of us are definitely looking forward to telling you, our faithful audience, about, and that is the 2022 Volkswagen GTI. This is the Mark 8 version. The first U.S. model debuted in 1983, back when it was called a Rabbit. I bet some people might not know that it was the Rabbit. Yes. Now it's the Golf. How did they go from Rabbit to Golf? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so the new model is lower and longer than its predecessor. It still keeps the hatchback body style. This time it's only 4 doors. They're not doing the 2-door model anymore. Handling's always been a real trademark of the GTI. And the new model gets an electronically controlled torque steering limited slip differential. It offers adaptive damping system. The 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine puts out 241 horsepower and 273 pounds-feet of torque. The original made 90 whole horsepower. So we're definitely having an upgrade there. Good news for the enthusiast out there, and I know I'm sharing company right now with 2 of them, is you can still get a 6-speed manual transmission. Yay, save the manuals. But you can also get an optional 7-speed dual clutch automatic, is also referred to as a DSG. Interior gets a big 10-inch infotainment screen. Looks like an extension of the instrument panel. And we're going to discuss that in just a second.
Oh, gosh.
Important safety features are standard: forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, lane keeping assist, blind spot. New model is built in Wolfsburg, Germany. Starts at $29,545 for the manual transmission. Opting for the DSG pumps the price up to $30,345. We rented a top-shelf Autobahn model from Volkswagen, which includes lots of nice bits: 19-inch wheels, head-up display, fancy leather seats, 12-way power driver seats. These are our first impressions. So, Alex, you're good with a clutch, so I'm going to throw it to you first.
What? Yeah. I'm not good with a clutch?
Just to add on to your very nicely done intro there, Mike, I just think something interesting with this car is that this is now the GTI and the Golf R that are both coming out kind of at the same time, are now the only way to get a Golf in the US. So you actually can't buy a regular Golf anymore, which I think is speaking to, just the way the car market is going. Is the only way to get this little hatchback is in the high performance versions. So you used to be able to get a, run-of-the-mill Golf, and that's just not the case anymore. So
no, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Well, Volkswagen is very quickly turning into the SUV company, and 3-row SUVs and all those. But at least they're keeping the GTI for us.
Right. And very happy about it. So aside from the controls that you alluded to, which we'll get to later, I was super impressed with this car, and I just love driving it. And I think, the GTI has always been that kind of jack of all trades car, and this just takes it even further. It's super enjoyable and fun to drive, great handling when you want it to be, but then it can also kind of settle into the background, when you just want to drive in a relaxed fashion or comfortably or whatever it is. So I just love that about it. And driving on the on the street, the handling seemed pretty good. I obviously really, really liked the 6-speed, and the engine was pretty great. But then when I got it out onto our track and did a couple of laps, that's where I was really blown away. Just the handling limits, especially for a front-wheel drive car, were just way higher than what I expected. The engine is really strong and responsive. In that limited slip differential that you mentioned, Mike, they have claims of eliminating understeer, which is a problem with high-powered front-wheel drive cars. I wouldn't necessarily use the word eliminates, but if you're trying to put in a clean lap around the track, it does a great job of putting power down, feeling neutral, being balanced, all those things. If you really try to explore the limit too far, you can feel, where that front-wheel drive push comes in. But, if you're trying to drive it well and fast, it's pretty amazing. So I was very impressed.
Wow, God, that's a pretty much of a ringing endorsement. And I'm wondering, can Jake possibly top this?
Well, this car kind of, holds a special place for me because when I was in high school, I drove around an 1880 Rabbit, not a GTI, but I slowly put GTI parts on and it kind of, turned into a GTI, sort of.
Cool.
As a GTI wannabe.
I was a GTI wannabe.
All lowercase.
Yes, exactly. Yes, but I mean, there's so much similarities. I mean, it was just a really fun car to drive back then. It is a really fun car to drive now. It's a somewhat practical car today, and it was back then. And it just shows that you could have a really fun time driving in like a little hatchback, front wheel drive hatchback. It doesn't have to be some swoopy sports car. It doesn't have to have something that's 2 seats only. And you could have just as much fun in it. And this is a extremely fun car to drive. I mean, the shifter, the steering, the handling. There is one thing that you've alluded to, which one thing, and it's the infotainment and the electronics. And I'm gonna throw back to you, Mr. Quincy. That's what I'm giving the new radio. I mean, come on. And here's the thing. It's that Volkswagen has been doing so well when it comes to infotainment systems. True. I mean, they're simple and just straightforward. And now, I mean, it's very similar to what we see in the ID4, the electric vehicle. It's like, I don't know. It reminds me of Cadillac Q version 1. It's like there's sliders and there's capacitive controls in the steering wheel, and adjusting the temperature is kind of like, you got to, it's why. What have they done? Why have they done this? Because you have got a incredible car to drive that I want to do driving. And then they've got this distractotainment system that is trying to get my eyes off the road to try to figure out how to adjust the seat heat or whatever it is. And sometimes it gets in your way too, because, you're turning the wheel and suddenly, I brushed my finger in the wrong spot on the wheel and now I've changed my radio station and I got to get back to it. So it just, that's so close. Yeah. Such a great car, such a great chassis, such a great driving vehicle. Why couldn't they just kept it simple like it was?
The Distracto infotainment, I think you should patent that. That's a good one.
I think they have.
Yeah, no. What also Jake is referring to is the first time that I ever was on a Consumer Reports Talking Cars podcast. We talked about the previous or even before that generation GTI, and it really did nothing for me. It didn't wow me like this one did. I did give it a thumbs down. I think the GTI is thumbs down. It's not that big a deal. I did say replace the letters GTI with MEH, which was was trendy to just go meh, because that's what my kids were doing, and I guess no one says that anymore. But yeah, so for the controls, replace GTI for OMG. Like, how could you have messed this up so badly? And Jake, you touched on this. I mean, Volkswagen's been making cars even before I was born, they were making cars. You would think that this is something they could really do well, is make simple controls, because they have a long history of doing that. We criticize Volkswagens for various things over the years here at Consumer Reports, but the controls were usually not one of that criteria.
They have been doing really well there. You know what it reminds me of, and I hate to say this, it reminds me of when BMW came out with iDrive, right? I mean, for the longest time, BMW was the ultimate driving machine, and they were incredible driving vehicles, and then they were like, we're going to be the ultimate gadget machines, and you look at what happened to BMW, they've taken their eye off the ball in terms of steering feel and that engagement, and really put it into all these advanced electronics. And and look, I mean, it's been somewhat successful for them, right? I mean, people are buying now BMW SUVs with all the latest gadgets. But for someone who was a car enthusiast who really loved those old BMW 3 Series, or even go back to the 2002, a little bit of that's gone, and now they're just adding on these electronics. And I feel a little bit of that. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, the GTI has not given up anything in terms of drivability. I mean, this thing is great, but I see the direction changing, and certainly for Volkswagen, they've changed the directions. It's really more of an SUV company than it is a sporty European sedan and hatchback company.
I love your example of the BMW, because the 7 Series back in the early 2000s, I believe, was the first model where the iDrive debuted. And we did our testing, we did our evaluations, and this was BMW's top-of-the-line model at the time. And that car sat. Nobody wanted to drive it after we were done testing it, because it was such a pain to do simple things like changing the radio station and stuff like that. And I thought, well, that's bad. I mean, some car companies' top of the line car, we should be fighting each other to get into it. we were like, okay, yeah, we're done with that. We're going to move on to something else. But I do share your guys. I'm not going to repeat everything you said. I love driving this car. I had the awesome opportunity to drive to do the B-roll that we're using on this podcast right now. So I got to thrash it around the track. It puts the power down really well. The shift action is good. The steering feedback is awesome. I love this car. It's not an STI like some people are like, oh, that's like the standard. But what's funny is I've driven just about every generation GTI, and I remember an 83 GTI, an 84 GTI that I drove way back when, and the ride was bone-crushingly hard. You felt every pebble, and even back then I thought that's good. That's a little extreme. So to see how the GTI's ride has evolved to a really good everyday usable car is a big credit to Volkswagen. I mean, clearly the GTI has made massive strides over almost 40 years in terms of performance. It's really sad that the controls took so many steps backwards.
I will be excited to drive the car that we plan on purchasing for the test program because, this top spec that we rented gets these adaptive dampers on it. And it has all this trick, tech going on to make the car at least handle better. All the GTIs are going to come with this limited slip differential, but it has these adaptive dampers and a couple other things to help it feel more balanced. So I will be interested to see, how well ours rides or maybe how well it doesn't ride compared to this one. Because you could go in there and adjust the firmness of the dampers and, it's not a huge drastic difference between the softest setting and the hardest, but, it's a noticeable difference. And so it kind of gives it more of that adaptability, I think, to different situations. So it'll be fun to check out what ours is like.
And we are in the process of trying to buy one. And as we get our test model, start putting on miles, we'll do a first drive and we'll do our first, our complete road test evaluations like we always do. Really looking forward to getting this car and exactly what you mentioned, Alex. Let's see how it's different than the Autobahn model that we rented for Volkswagen. We have one question for today's podcast, and we love your questions, video, text questions. Keep them coming. TalkingCars@iCloud.com. That's TalkingCars@iCloud.com. And the question we've got today is from Chris from Concord, Massachusetts. And Chris writes, does Consumer Reports consider paddle shifters a potential safety hazard? Manufacturers now include paddles on the underside of steering wheels in many models. This placement can cause unsuspecting motorists to change gears accidentally, startling and distracting the driver. Drivers should have the ability to disable this feature. Very few folks are looking to shift gears manually. What say you? Good question. Alex, tossing it to you.
Thanks, Chris, and somewhat local. That's pretty cool to get a question like that. So, first and foremost, we don't really have any data that says that these shifters are a safety concern. We usability test all the vehicles that come through our program, and it's never been brought up or discovered that it's a safety concern. I can see the argument that if you don't know what it does and you activate it or press one of these buttons, that it could be a distraction. But I would also argue that that could be the case for any control that you activate in the car that you're not familiar with or causes something that is unexpected. So yeah, we don't really see that as an issue. And it starts to make more sense. The reason they're there is, as we move towards these different electronic shifters, these rotary shifters, push buttons, and also they're attached to transmissions that have, maybe 10 gears. Starts to make sense to use buttons to select gears individually rather than, a traditional shifter that has like a PRND and, 1, 2, 3 or whatever there on the center console. So that's kind of what's driving that change. And they're less for, shifting yourself as you would in a manual car or aggressive driving or anything like that. It's just mainly there to allow you to take advantage really of engine braking down hills. So if you're coasting down a really steep hill, which I know we have tons of around here, it is advantageous, and some people prefer to try to use engine braking to take some pressure off the brakes, that sort of thing. And then one last thing to add is the car is never going to allow you to shift into a gear that is, going to damage the car or over rev the engine or anything like that. So yes, if you grab it unknowingly, it may raise engine RPM, but it's never going to allow you to put it in first gear, for example, when you're going 60 miles an hour and cause any damage or anything dangerous in that regard. So, yes, I mean, I could see being able to disable these as an option for people who really prefer to do that. But again, it's not a safety issue that we are seeing anyway.
And I'm glad you brought up the topic of engine braking. And I was going to ask Jake, do you ever find yourself using these paddle shifters just kind of for fun, or are you kind of like me? Unless you're going down a hill, you kind of ignore it.
I ignore those. I mean, for if I was driving a stick shift, I absolutely use engine braking. But I mean, the truth is in everyday driving, you're not going to be heating up your brakes that much. That you could drive just more smoothly, just drive using your brakes. Mm-hmm. So I mean, the truth is that in some ways, I mean, Alex is right. If you want to go and do that, it gives you a way to keep your hands on the steering wheel as opposed to taking your hands off the steering. So in a way, it's actually safer to use those than actually taking your hands off the wheel. But Alex is exactly right. Anything that you're inadvertently operating, and there's more and more stuff now on the steering wheel. I mean, now we got it's a full typewriter, that's on the keyboard, on your steering wheel. Wow, I really sound old, huh? But but I mean, the issue is all the capacitive controls. I mean, it's so easy as you're steering to inadvertently do something that distracts you. Generally, these things are kind of a little further away, and I think if you hit it once, you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. And I figured out how to put it back in the drive. But we haven't had many people come to us and say, hey, what are these for? Why is this happening? So.
Well, thanks for that answer, Alex. And, that's going to about do it for this episode of Two Old Guys and Alex talking about cars. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and topics that we discussed. Just a reminder, keep those questions coming in, talkingcars@icloud.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.